Here we go.
I can. 1 second. I will.
Sure, everything is working over here. Here we go. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 chapters of Rambam. We are starting the Sefer of Shoftim, the book of Judges, which is the 14th and the final book of the entire Yad HaChazaka. The Rambam always begins first by saying the words B'Shem Hashem Keil Olam, that all of this is being done in the name of God, who's the master of the world. The Rambam then quotes a pasuk. There are actually different versions. What verse is the verse for this book? I'm going to read the one from Proverbs. Psach picha shvat tzedek din ani v'evyin. Open your mouth and judge righteously and render justice to the poor and to the indigent. And Sefer Arba'asa, this is the 14th book, which the Rambam is calling the book of Shoftim, the book of Judges. In this, we're going to have the following 5 big topics on Chosed Chamesh. And this is the order. We're going to learn, firstly, which will be today, Hilchos Sanhedrin, the laws of judges, and the Ha'anashim Hamasurim Lahem, and penalties placed under their jurisdiction. And this is extremely important, that when it comes to penalties, when it comes to punishment, when it comes to reward, God is the master of the world. God is the one that rewards, God is the one that punishes. Hashem, in certain limited areas, asked of us that we should partner with him. And there are certain penalties that are under our jurisdiction. And therefore, whenever a person feels that justice was not done in a human court, it was meant to be that way. Justice ultimately is in the hands of God. We have the zchus at times to be partners with. The next topic will be the laws of edus, the laws of witnesses. We're going to have the laws of the rebellious ones, Hilchos Mamrim. We're going to learn the 4th Hilchos Eivel, the laws of mourning, that the Rambam puts almost all the way at the end. And the final series will be Hilchos Malachim and Milchamos, or Milchamos Seihem, the laws of kings and their wars. And then the Rambam goes on to break down all of the mitzvahs that are going to be covered in the first of these 5 Hilchos Sanhedrin. The Ha'anashim Hamasurim Lahem says that Rambam Yesh B'chlal Shloishim mitzvahs. We're going to cover 30 commandments of God, 30 commandments of the Torah. 10 of them will be positive commandments, 20 of them will be negative commandments, and here we go into details. Number 1, the mitzvah l'manoi shoftim, to appoint judges. Number 2, shaloi l'manoi dayan she'enu yodei derech hamishpat, not to appoint a judge that does not know the proper manner of judgment, as we'll explain. Number 3, lintois achri rabim, to always lean to the majority if there is a disagreement amongst the judges. Number 4, shaloi laharoy imrabu hamachayvim de'ishachad, that even though, yes, we follow the majority, when it comes to all capital cases, in which if one will be found guilty, he'll be put to death in Beis Din, a majority of 1 is not enough. You have to have at least a majority of 2. Rule number 5, mitzvah number 5, that a judge who argued in favor, in other words, to find an acquittal for someone in a capital case, that judge cannot change his mind later and argue for a conviction. Obviously, there's a lot more details to this mitzvah, but that's the general mitzvah. Number 6, laharig b'skila, to execute by stoning. Obviously, those who will be chayiv skila. Number 7, laharig b'seifa, to execute by burning. Number 8, laharig b'saif, to execute through decapitation. Number 9, laharig b'chenek, which is the 4th and the final 4 types of misas Beis Din, to execute through strangulation. Now, certain people, after they were already put to death in Beis Din, then number 10, there's a mitzvah. Sometimes they hang them, and then, as we'll learn, to immediately take them down. 11, likbayt hanera, to bury the one who was killed by Beis Din on the same day that he was put to death, that he was executed. Number 12, shaloi talin ivlasei, not to allow for his corpse to remain unburied overnight. Moving on, 13, shaloi lahacha yois machashiv, not to allow a sorcerer to live. Number 14, lahalkos l'rasha, to give floggings, to give malchus to those who deserve malchus. Number 15, shaloi yosef b'hakos haloika, not to add more than the 39, as we'll see. Right. Number 16, Shaloi laharoig naki ba'umdan hadas, not to kill an innocent person based on, let's say, apparent conclusion. The level of proof that we have in a Beis Din is really unbelievable, to the point that many times we, the Jewish people, needed to create another judicial track other than the Beis Din, because the standards and the laws of Beis Din are godly. We cannot tamper with them. But what happens if the onus of proof is not found? But we as a society know that that guy is a murderer. Got a problem. And as we'll learn, there's a responsibility to have, really, we had two justice systems. We had the Beis Din, and then we had a civil, not a civil meaning a non-religious. And there is an important place for them. Like I'm just mentioning, you don't have enough halachic proof, but we know that this guy is a troublemaker. He's gonna damage society. What do you do? Nothing? Of course not. As we'll see. Number 17, shloila anois anus. If someone was coerced to do something, as we'll define, a person is not held guilty for that which he was forced to do. Number 18, shloilachus al hoidik chaveiro yochodevoy, not to have mercy when someone did kill someone else, or if someone damaged someone else. You know, we'll learn later about that balance, that we want to get a judge that has a midah, has a character trait of being a merciful person. That's extremely important. Having a cruel person as a judge is not allowed. But when a person is a merciful person type in the court, he cannot have undue mercy. He has to met out justice. So there's a certain amount of mercifulness that will be imbued in the judgment, but it's going to be at some place of judgment. Number 19, not to have mercy simply for the fact that the guy is poor. Number 20, not to honor a great man. That's not the place. He should not be honored in a court of justice. Number 21, you know, it goes sometimes, you know, this guy is a sinner. So Mistama, he's sinful here also. You know, everyone has to be equal in the standing in judgment for that specific case. Number 22, not to act deceitfully in judgment. We'll see what that means. Number 23, not to pervert judgment against a ger. Now you will pervert it by being overly merciful. He's a convert, he's an orphan. Number 24, in the positive, lishpait b'tzedek, to render righteous judgment. We'll explain what that means. Number 25, that a judge may not fear, may Israel from a powerful person. Now a judge, as we'll see, has the right to abnegate himself, to say, I cannot be the judge for this guy, because I know if I'm going to find him guilty, he's going to kill my family. He has the right to recuse himself, but that's before he stepped in as role of judge. Once a person sat in that chair, they're not allowed to have fear. They have to go through all the way until the end. Number 26, not to take a bribe. We'll see how far that goes. Number 27, not to accept a false report. Number 28, not to curse judges. That goes on the people. Number 29, not to curse the leader, the king, or the prince, as we'll define later. And the final mitzvah, the negative mitzvah, number 30, not to curse any kosher Jew. So these are the 30 mitzvahs that are covered. And now we're going to go dive right into the first chapter. Today, we will be learning the first 3 chapters of the laws of Sanhedrin. And as we always mention, that in the beginning chapters, we have the most foundational rules, as we will see. In the first chapter, we're going to simply learn about the rule and the responsibility of establishing courthouses, of establishing batei dinim, how much they are needed and how many locations they are needed, how many judges should be placed in every court, etc., etc. The first chapter has 10 halachas, beginning with halacha al. Mitzvahs aseh shel Torah. There's a positive command, a mitzvah of the Torah, Lamanoi Shoiftim, to appoint judges, and the Shoitrim will interpret the word Shoitim either as a policeman, but it really means as an enforcement officer. Because you can't have a judge rendering a ruling and people still having the option of not obeying, which is exactly what happens today in the Jewish Beis Din. The challenge for a Jewish Beis Din is that they have no power. Now, in most cases, why are they even there? Because people want to hear what the Torah has what to say. So they have influence. If both parties want to hear the opinion of the Torah, But normally they only want to hear it because each party thinks that they're righteous. The moment the court renders a ruling, which means you're guilty, you're innocent, but the other guy is guilty, it's very weird that the guilty party is going to walk away saying, yeah, that's what God wants from me. Normally he's going to say the judges don't know how to make a judgment. The judges don't know how to learn. The judges don't understand. Now what happens then? Today, nothing. There's nothing you can do to enforce it. But so when God, now that's galus. The world is not perfect. What God wants, it goes together. That you appoint judges and you appoint enforcement officers. And where should they be appointed? Medina Medina. I know that in modern Hebrew, Medina means a country. Medina in halacha means a city. In every city. And Ubachol Pelach or Pelach. Pelach means a region. A region is an area much bigger than a city. Now hold on. If you have one in every city, why do you need one in every region? So the commentators explain it means the following. We're going to learn that not every city is worthy to have a court, as we'll define. You have to have a minimum number of people living there. You have to have a certain amount of scholars that live there locally. So if you have a city that doesn't have the qualifications to have a Beis Din in it, then aside of that, you have to look at the region. So what de facto happened is that there were certain localities in the Holy Land where there were various cities adjacent to each other. None of them qualified to have a Beis Din in the city, but you made one for the region. In other words, we don't want for there to be a large area in which there is no court. As it says, Shoiftim v'shoitrim titan locha. Shoiftim refers to the dayanim, to the judges, but not roaming judges. They have to be kavuyim bebeis din. You need judges to be in a specific location, right? Witnesses can be roaming. A beis din has to be kavua. A location in which if people have an issue, litigants know exactly where to go. That is the meaning of a shofet, of a judge. Shoitrim, again, shoitrim, police, but it's not police. It's the enforcement officers of the court. These are people that are equipped with a billet, they're equipped with a lash. It doesn't have to be taken literally. If you're living with a society that needs that, so be it. It means that they are coming with force. They stand in front of the judges to make sure that in court, they're going to do what the judges say. They are also the ones, they have to walk around the marketplaces, or they have to patrol the marketplaces, and the stores. What are they doing out there in the market? To regulate the prices. And as we learned previously, that when people are using weight measures, they have to constantly inspect it to make sure that no one is using it in a malicious way. And to inflict corporal punishment on all offenders. So as we have been learning, and as we'll continue to learn, that in the Torah, corporal punishment is a legit way of punishment. Actually, emotional punishment, which let's go into incarceration, the aspect of protecting society is great. This guy is a danger, you put him in jail, he can't hurt others. That's good, the Torah wants that. But as far as punishing a person, putting a person in jail is not a corporal punishment, it's a psychological punishment, it's an emotional punishment, and it's excessive, not acceptable. Corporal punishment is accepted. Not beating a guy up to death, but the way the Torah says Malchus, just to get the right to align him. Yeah, Yaron is laughing. Corporal punishment is much lesser of a punishment than emotional punishment.
You get to Malchus by doing that. Then you become an angel. You go to Malchus, you see God, you all of a sudden become an angel.
So Yaron is saying that when the guy is getting Malchus, they also see stars, but they really see God, and then they become Allah. But I don't know. The point of these enforcement officers is everything that they do is al pei hadayanim. They are here to execute what the judges are saying. And whenever we see someone misbehaving, right, when we see a person perpetrating injustice, so in other words, sometimes, why am I going to court? Because you called me to court. I'm a litigant. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. No, sometimes there isn't a specific person that's going to call me to court. But there has to be a system, which is another reason why you have enforcement officers, or you have a hotline, that many people are saying so-and-so appears to be doing something not good. Like a guy is speeding and he's going 150 miles an hour. He's a danger. right? He's not being taken to court by a litigant. The society takes him to court. If someone is doing injustice, he has to be brought to Beis Din. Who's going to take him to Beis Din? These judges. So they are like inspectors. And then in the Beis Din, the judges will judge him according to his wickedness. Halacha number 2. This obligation of we made a Beis Din, go to the Beis Din. No, of putting a Beis Din in every city, and if not in every city, at least in every region. That's only in the Holy Land. That's only in Eretz Yisrael. You don't need. There's no obligation of putting a Beis Din in every region. People want, they can do it. But if you want, you can have in the whole country one Beis Din. As it says, where should you place it in every gate? In the country that God Almighty gave you, which is the Holy Land. Halacha 3. So let's go to the Holy Land. So how many fixed courts must there be? And the next question is, how many judges in each court? So the Rambam goes from the core court, which is what we call the Supreme Court, which is what we call the Sanhedrin Gedolah. We begin with that because everything comes from there. And from there, it expands out, as we'll see. The first court that's established is based in Hagadol, and they were located in the Mikdash, in the Holy Temple. They are also called the Sanhedrin Gedolah, the Great Sanhedrin. Uminyanim, how many judges do we have in this court? Echad v'shivim, 71. Shenemar, as it says, Esveli shivim ish v'ziknei Yisrael. The Rambam is quoting a passage from the portion of Baha Aloischa, that when they complained once again that they want meat every day with the manna, and Moshe Rabbeinu tells God that I can't carry the people by myself, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu to gather 70 people. That is the origin, the first time there was this Sanhedrin Gedolah. Now don't forget, it was not 70 with Moses. It was 70 aside of Moshe. Moshe was on top of them. As it says, the 70 should be with you. No, it's not 69 with you. 70 with you. Now, Hagadol b'chachma shebekulam, the one who has the highest level of chachma. And it's important to point out that we learned this in Chassidus. Chachma, people say wisdom. Chachma is the highest faculty that we have, the highest intellectual faculty, the one that enables a person to know what he does not know. We can already call that the place of intuition, even though, of course, you don't judge based on intuition. You have to have bina and das and have many other qualifications. But it is the greatest chacham. The greatest chacham also, Chassidus says, chacham means humility, intellectual humility. It's the greatest judge is defined by the one who has the greatest amount of intellectual humility. That is the one, he'll be the one designated as the head of the Sanhedrin. He's sometimes called the Rosh HaYeshiva. He is the one that's called by the sages Nasi. The word Nasi could be translated as king. The word Nasi can be translated as prince. In the context of the Sanhedrin, the Nasi is numero uno, the top man. And he is the one that stands in the place of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's a very big statement. The Nasi of the great Sanhedrin is the living Moses. Now, we will take from the other 71 that will be considered the second greatest, or the assistant to the Nasi. And he is going to sit to the right, and he's called Av Beis Din. Now, Kavan is whoever has the Zoom is putting up a fantastic picture. And just for the record, for people who are going to be learning this in the future online, that I know that we're making up the chapters that were learned over Shabbos. So I know that when we learned this last year, the clarity that I'm going to share now, I did not have then. And therefore, there's going to be certain statements that you're going to hear from me in the coming chapters that you should put aside for this statement. If you can you have to see it's a visual. The Sanhedrin, the 70, 71, did not sit in one semicircle. They actually were made up into 3 rows. The Sanhedrin, the judges themselves. Really, 69 were divided into 3 rows. That's the way it was set up. And you had 2 people, which is the Nasi and the Av Beis Din, that sat alone almost in the center of this half a circle. If they wanted, they would face the judges. If they would turn their chairs, they would face the other side. And as we'll see soon, that on the other side, there was another 3 half a circles comprised of students who are worthy eventually to become judges in the Sanhedrin. So really what you had a circle, almost a circle, with the Nasi and the second one that we're going to call the head of the Beis Din, the Av Beis Din, who's the second. He's the assistant to the Nasi. They were almost like in the middle. The litigants also were in the middle. You have to see a picture for that. Now, Bashar Hashivim, the other 70, even though really it's not 70, it means a 69. Yoshvim with Shneim, they would sit not on the side. In other words, the other members of the other judges would sit before them, opposite them. Now here also, who would go where? Kefim Alasan, the greater would be closer. Kol Hagadol Lechavei B'Chachma will be closer to the Nasi from the left. Now, if you can look at this picture, if you see a picture, number A is the Nasi, B is the Av Beis Din, is the only the assistant. Now you have to visualize A and B facing the circle, the half a circle to the left. They're facing the judges now. When they're facing the judges, if you can imagine, look at the leftmost point from A. That is where the third greatest would sit. In other words, you begin to the left of the Nasi, and then you align them. Again, you have to estimate the greater is going to be, the greatest will be the first guy in the innermost half a circle to the left of A. When I say left, that means if A is facing the circle to the left. You get it? They all sit together in a semicircle. What's the advantage of this position? This allows another thing. I'm sure that eventually these 3 rows of judges were not on the same level. They were, one level was higher than the other. It allowed for A and B, for the Nasi and the Av Beis Din, when they faced the judges, they were able to see all of the judges properly. Okay. Now, aside of that, so this is a Sanhedrin Gedolah. And again, when people are looking at this picture, the whole number D, that's another rule. We'll see these are students. The litigants go in the middle of the circle. Okay, now, aside of that's the first court that we established, the Sanhedrin Gedolah. We had 2 other courts. Each one was comprised of 23 judges. One of them was fixed by the entry to the Azara, and the other was sat. Their location was at the doorway of Temple Mount. Now that we established the core in the Beis Hamikdash, and in Har Habayis, now we expand. We would establish in every city amongst the Holy Land, we're speaking about in the geographical Eretz Yisrael, but here the Rambam is beginning with some of the qualifications of the city. It must be a city in which you have at least 120 men that live there, plus other qualifications. There they would theoretically establish a Sanhedrin Ketano. One thing is very clear, you never imported judges. You needed to get the judges from the city. And where would they sit? At the entry to the city. Because when you drive into a town right now, I know in the Western world that we live in, when I go, you go into a town, where's everything happening? In the center of the city. But you go in there, I know when you drive into Israel right now, you drive into a beautiful town. It's beautiful what the Jewish people are building up. But everything is in the center of the town. Lahavdil here in Chutz La'aretz. Like, inside the heart of Beverly Hills, you have a court. By Yidden, it's not that way. When you enter a city, at the gate of the city, that's where the court is. As it says, and we're quoting a pasuk from Amos, "V'hasigu b'shar mishpat," and you shall establish judgment in your gates, meaning at the entrance. How large should every Sanhedrin be? 23 judges. And here also, there's only one, not one and an assistant. 1 second. And the other, and the others sit in a semicircle in order, again, for him, this head judge, to be able to see all of the other judges. Yes?
So every city had a Sanhedrin?
Theoretically, I'm saying theoretically because not only does the city have to have 120 people, so you're thinking that that's easy today.
No, every city, every town,
Wait a second. Every city it has to have a Sanhedrin if you have 23 qualified people from that city. And we'll see soon there's certain qualifications that are very high. The bar was very high, at least for the guy in the top. And not every city had such qualified people. So
the state of Israel didn't have one.
No, the state of Israel is not a Torah state at all yet. State of Israel, I'm not going to speak anything negative. It's not a Torah state. It's a different system. I'm sure that many, like the Western world, they model themselves after other Western countries, which model themselves after other countries, which eventually model themselves after the Jewish people.
So in Cairo, there was Sanhedrin, and in Jerusalem?
In Cairo, there cannot be a Sanhedrin.
Huh?
The great Sanhedrin can only be in the Holy Temple. But when you have a great Sanhedrin, there was, yes. Now, we're going to get to other courts that are only comprised of 3 judges, or 10 judges, or 11 judges. We'll get to that we have today. But we're missing the core, we're missing the soul. Once you don't have the great Sanhedrin, everything has much less power.
Yeah, that's my point. The great Sanhedrin was just one?
Just one.
So it's not every city.
Just the great Sanhedrin of 71 is only one. Now I'll tell you another detail. We're not going to learn this today, but we learn this together in the Gemara. That the great Sanhedrin who exiled themselves, they exiled themselves during the times of the Romans before the temple was destroyed. They eventually exiled themselves 10 times. The last time they convened was in Tiberias. And we have a tradition that they will reconvene with Mashiach in Tiberias. In other words, if they are convened in Israel, in Tiberias, or in another location, that's a lot better than nothing. That's great, but it's not as great as them being convened in the temple. That's where they belong. Now, number 4, a city that doesn't have 120 people, it doesn't mean there's no court. Of course there'll be a court. You establish a court of 3 judges. Why? What's the magic of 3? Why not establish a court of 2 or of 1? No, because you can never make a Jewish court less than 3. Why? Because we have to have a number in which we are allowing for there to be a majority and a minority opinion. At the 3, if you have 2, you can have a one against 1. That's not good. We're going with the premise that everyone thinks differently. We're not going to come to a unanimous ruling. We don't even want a unanimous ruling. We're going to see later a unanimous ruling is not even good. Someone who is found guilty for a capital sin, unanimously, he will not be put to death. So you have to have different opinions. You have to have a number which is an odd number. The smallest odd number. Now you can say number 1. Number 1 is just 1. Now, halacha number 5, if a city doesn't have 2 great sages, now let's define what that means. Echad, 1, greatness here means that this person is able to teach and to render halachic rulings in all of the areas of the Torah. Someone who masters the entire oral Torah. That's number 1. Number 2, 1 who doesn't master it himself yet, but he has enough knowledge that when he hears someone speaking about any topic in the Torah, he knows how to listen diligently, and he knows what is considered the question, and he understands how to come to a solution. That's the second. 1 step lower. You have to have at least 2 people in that city that have this amount of knowledge. If you don't have that, ein moshivim Sanhedrin. You will not make a Sanhedrin even though there are thousands of Jews in the city. You'll make a Beis Din of 3. You'll make a Beis Din of 3. You can make many Bati Dinim of 3. You can make a Beis Din of 10, as we'll see later. The more, the better. But we will never call it a Sanhedrin. And a Sanhedrin is either 71, and there's only 1 71 court. The other Sanhedrins have to have 23. You're not going to make a court of 23. You're not going to call it a Sanhedrin. You have to have these 2 people. Halacha 6, continuing. Sanhedrin sheyesh bo shnai meilu, when a Sanhedrin has 2 of these people, meaning 1 shiro l'daber, 1 that can speak, not speak, just talk. People can talk. Someone who masters all of the Torah, and someone who is able to listen diligently in all of the Torah, then you have a Sanhedrin. Now, what happens if a city has more than 2 scholars, a city has 3 scholars, then we call this already an average Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin didn't have 3 judges. You had 23. But from the 23, you need to have a few exceptional people. But you had 4 people that know how to speak. That means if you have in one Sanhedrin 4 people that on their own, they mastered the entire oral Torah, that's already called a wise Sanhedrin. How do we get there? By having good educational systems, by having the parents that role model to come to a society where you have so many people that are that learning. Halacha 7. We're living in a world now, Yaron, that we're there. I see that. The amount of people in Israel that have this knowledge is unbelievable. Since the times of Moses, we didn't have this. Yes. Now there's always a deeper mind, a sharper mind, but the people, we're speaking about people that by heart mastered the whole entire Torah. This is something that exists today. Did not exist, and it's unbelievable. You can watch online. There's a group of Jews called Shasid, Jews that learn 8 daf a day. And they're youngsters, they're in their 20s and their 30s. They know everything. Now, that's their life. They sacrifice a lot for that people have no understanding. They learn every day, the whole day. It's just unbelievable. And you need to have God needs these Jews. So if you have a Torah question, you have to know, they know. Now, you can say there's a judgment. Do you go to the right? Do you go to the left? Every person has their own way of thinking. I get that. But if you don't have the basic knowledge, you have nothing.
So you, with all your knowledge, you respect them and their.
Oh, they're 50 steps ahead.
Are you serious?
Yeah, but 1 second. You have to have a life of learning Torah 15 hours a day for 30 years to get there.
All the non-religious think that they're just wasting time.
No, I don't think they think that. No. These are great people. Now, like, if someone is in the system and they don't fully use it out, of course they're wasting their time. This is not for the masses. Most people don't have the capacity. Even if they're geniuses, like how much can you learn? Many people do good by learning 3 hours a day, 4 hours, which is beautiful, which is amazing. Many people do good learning 15 minutes a day. But to learn, that's a whole different world. It's a different.
And there are people.
You have many people, and we never had so many people. It's like preparing for Mashiach. Yeah. Now, aside of having 23 judges, aside of that, you sit in front of them. You sit in front of them 3 rows of scholars, students. In every row, there's 23. Guys, 23 times 3 is 69. We're about 69 plus the 23. Speaking about in this courthouse of a minor Sanhedrin, there were 92 people there. 23 judges and these 69 student judges. Now, the system is, see, today when you're a teacher, which student do you put in front of you today? The student that you have to give the most attention to, which is the weakest student. That's because you have to teach people. The greater you are, the closer you get. So if you are in the innermost row, that's because you qualify to be closer to moving over to being a judge. The greatest, meaning the most scholarly. Now we're going to learn it soon. There are many other character traits that you need to have to be a judge, not scholarship. More important character traits. You have to be humble. You have to be honest. We'll get to that later. But we're speaking now about the capacity of being a judge. So the closest, and on every row with themselves, it wasn't random sitting like we learned before. The one at the edge of the bench, that was the greatest scholar. The second one was one level lower. And as we'll see, the people on these benches slowly but surely made their ways to sit with the judges. They changed sides from a student to a judge. Halacha 8. If there was a disagreement amongst the Sanhedrin. Now we're going to learn about this soon in the following chapters. So let's just give an example. Like we mentioned, that if you're having a capital case, not only do you have to have dissent, you have to have different opinions, but you have to have a majority of 2 that finds that person guilty in order to execute it. What happens is, 23 can be divided 12, 11. 12 and 11 is 23. So if 12 say guilty, 11 say innocent. That's not enough to execute it. you have to add another judge. So there comes a point where you have to add new judges. Now, we're going to use a word that's called smicha. Today, we borrowed that word, and we use it when someone gets today's smicha, which is not the real smicha. To sit on the Sanhedrin, you need real smicha. And we're going to speak about smicha later. The Rambam is going to speak up. So now the students don't have smicha yet. When you have to be added to the bench, you were given smicha right away. You didn't get a quiz to get smicha. You got a quiz to enter that room to be a student. Once you're sitting there, you got smicha when they needed you to sit as a judge. So if they had to give smicha to one of them in order to have a larger number of Sanhedrin, as we'll learn soon, so they took the guy that's sitting in that position. They already knew who's the greatest. The guy that's sitting there. Now what happens? Everyone moves up a chair. So when one guy was promoted, so then the guy that was second to the bench will sit at the edge of the bench now. And everyone moves up a place. What happens is that everyone was bumped up a place. Now the third bench is missing a person. Now you have to go back out there and find now the most qualified guy out to bring him in. And that keeps on going. Whenever there's a Sanhedrin, aside of, as we mentioned, it's already a total of 92, 69, and 23. You also needed to have two scribes, not one, two scribes that were sitting by the Sanhedrin, one to the right and one to the left. One would write the reasons of everyone who's finding the litigant innocent, because the judge didn't only say innocent, he would explain why, and his words would be written down. In every court today, you have what do they call these people that write quickly? There's a name for that. They took it from us because God told Moshe there should be people. This is when the judges speak. When the judges are speaking, everything they're saying is being written down. It doesn't have to be verbatim, but the content of what the rationale has to be written down. Stenographers. And one would write Divrei HaMachayvin. So a court by Yidden has to have two stenographers. It's amazing. It's not the same person. And it's not because you can't write that quick. In principle, one guy is Zakai, one guy Chai. The final halacha 10, now that we spoke about all these people that are needed, now you know why amongst other preconditions, you have to have 120 people in a city to make a Sanhedrin Katana. The first thing is we don't import people. The city has to produce these great people on their own. But why? What's the secret of 120? So we're going to see that a city needs certain things. And the basic needs of a city will demand for there to be 120 men. In order for there to be, theoretically, 23 judges. Then the three rows, each one of 23, which is 69. So guys, 69 and 23 is 92. Then you have to have, every city has to have a sort of batlanim shel beis haknesses. Yeah, there has to be 10 people that their job is to be in the beis medrash prior to the time of davening, for there always to be a minyan whenever the davening was called, because it's a big disrespect to God if a minyan is called for whatever time and there isn't 10 people. They would be called 10 batlanim. Batlanim means people that are doing nothing. See, the learners are not called doing nothing. These 10 batlanim, that was their job. We call them batlanim. Their job is just to be in the synagogue. So you have now, where were you up to 100, right? 102. Two scribes, 104. Two chazanim. I know the word chazan means a cantor. It doesn't mean a cantor. Two chazanim means two court officers that are needed to subpoenas, to give people lashes. All right. So now we're up to 106, right? Two balei dinim. You have two litigants. That's 108. Two witnesses, 110. There has to be the potential of being mizamim, the witnesses. There has to be the potential of being mizamim, the zayim. And we'll speak about that soon. Don't worry. So that's 112, 114. Every city has to have two tzedakah collectors. That's up to 116. Then you have to have a third person involved in the distribution of tzedakah. That's 170. Every city has to have a reifa uman. A reifa uman means a doctor who's also a bloodletter. It was very common that people would, as for therapy, would let blood once a month or once in 2 months. In the bigger cities, you can afford to have a doctor and another bloodletter. But at least to have someone who knows how to take care of people's medicinal needs. So that's 118. Lavlon means a scribe. This is not a court scribe. The city needs a scribe. People have to write documents, not a religious scribe. We're making a sale, we're making a loan. You have to have someone who can write. Not everyone want to write. That's 119, and the 120th is a teacher. You can put the teacher, you see, Acharon Chavit. The teacher should be first. Hey, how do you get the judges together?
Where's the butcher, tailor, all the other?
See, amazing. I like what Kevin is saying. In other words, you can live in a city where there's no butcher, don't eat meat, there's no tailor, don't wear new clothing. You cannot live in a city where there's no teacher. You cannot live in a city where there's no proper court, because then there'll be lawlessness, as we see. In other words, security is the most important thing that a society needs, and it always comes first. Even when Mashiach will come, as we'll learn at the end of the series, prior to building the temple, more important is just bringing law and order. We cannot have a society without law and order. It's the most important responsibility of government. Even for Jews, that for us, the whole thing is about building, the whole kavanah is about building the temple. It's amazing that we're living at a time that only we don't want. We can build the temple now if we would want. We never had that for thousands of years. We would want, we would build it. We don't want it. The non-religious don't want it. The religious also don't want it. They like praying about it, talking about it. We can build the temple. Go build the temple. Okay, anyways, but prior to that, we are obligated to bring law and order. So because today here you have the 120. Okay, now that we have a limited amount of time, we're going to have to start jogging instead of walking, which is fine. We have 2 more chapters, very easy chapters. We are starting with the second chapter. The second chapter is going to speak about the qualifications of judges. And as we'll see, and this is important for us to know, for our children to know, that in Judaism, of course, knowledge is important. It's not the most important. We'll see that character traits are more important. And if you have a person who's very, very knowledgeable without these character traits, the knowledge that that person has is actually detrimental to the person. It's going to make him arrogant. It's going to hurt him, not help him. And it's going to hurt the society. This chapter has 14 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. It says that Rambam, we do not allow for someone to join this amazing court system that we call Sanhedrin, whether it's the big one in the temple, whether it is in all of the minor ones throughout the whole Israel, right? Courts of 23. Ella, here's to the words. Anoshim, first of all, it has to be male. It's only male gender. People can be uncomfortable with that. People can ask for why. But in halacha, a woman cannot be a judge. It has to be a man. And they have to have both chachma and bina. And we learn a lot in Chassidus what that means. Chachma is, like we mentioned, a certain level of intuition. And bina means a person who has a lot of, who's very cognitively very developed. A person that we call very, very smart. They have to be mufloim b'toidas b'chachmas ha'toida. They have to be unbelievable knowledgeable in the chachma of Torah. Baladeya meruba. They have to have a broad intellectual potential, however you'll understand that. They also have to know some of other chachmas. They have to have some knowledge of other intellectual disciplines. Guys, there's a lot of intellectual disciplines, and it's different. For example, they have to know, ideally, they have to be doctors, but they should at least have a lot of medicinal knowledge. It's a different chachma to be a doctor. They have to know cheshbon. They have to know mathematics. They have to know tkufos. They have to know how to make a calendar. They have to know astronomy. They have to know astrology. Not master it, but they have to have knowledge in it. They have to be familiar with it. They have to know the They have to know the practices of fortune tellers, of magic, and of sorcery. It's a different type of intellectual world. They have to also know the hollow teachings of idolatry. They have to have knowledge in everything that's out there in the world. Not mastering it the way they mastered the Torah, but they have to be familiar with it. And all of that is necessary, because if someone is being tried in a Sanhedrin because they're being accused, let's say, of practicing sorcery, if you don't know on yourself what that means, how do you know if that person actually practicing? We are against getting experts in court, which is the way it works today. We need for the judges to be the experts. And if not, they don't qualify to be judges. We did not allow for there to be an interpreter in a court. We need to have amongst the judges someone who masters that language. So it's the litigants and the judges, not the litigants and independent chachamim who are going to then filter and give their professional opinion. That never exists in a Jewish base. Another thing. Another Kohanim Levim Yisraelim that have yichus, that have lineage. What type of lineage? A lineage that will allow them to marry into families of Kohanim. Now you can argue, why is the person guilty if he has no? Not guilty. He just doesn't qualify. As it says, again, Parshas Baloischa, that they will stand with you. So Chazal learn it means that they should be like you, Moshe, in Chachma and in Yira and in Yichus. The Rambam didn't speak about the Yira yet. Now we'll get to there in a moment. Halacha 2. Mitzvah. Ideally, we want to have all three types of Jews, Kahanim and Levim, because it says, Ubasa Elokai Hanim Halavim. However, if we don't find Kahanim and Levim, even if all of the 23 are Yisraelim, that's okay. Halacha number 3. We never established not a very old person. Now, how do you say very old? It's not clear. Nor a Sadis. Sadis is a man who never biologically cannot have kids, a eunuch or other types of illnesses in one's genitalia, because these people have a certain streak of cruelty, and we don't allow that to be in a judge, nor a person who never had children. Why? Because we want for the judge to have in him the attribute of mercifulness, Rachaman. Not that he's going to be merciful in judgment, meaning he's going to find the guilty innocent. Of God forbid. But he needs to have that character trait. He has to have within him Rachmanis. Halacha number 4. We don't allow for a king of Israel to be a judge in the Sanhedrin. Why? Because once a king says an opinion, no one is allowed to disagree with him. No one is allowed to lamrois devar. You cannot repudiate his words. So you're stuck. But a Sanhedrin has to be a place where people can disagree. Avol, a Kohen Gadol, if he's fitting, could be a judge. Halacha number 5. Malcha beis David. Unique rules for kings that come from the household of David that have inherently humility, even though they cannot be, like we just mentioned, a judge of the Sanhedrin, but done in Hain, they may sit in judgment. Again, like we mentioned before, that aside of the halachic judicial system, the government always had the option of having another track, another system. And in there, the king can sit in judgment. And as David HaMelech, he would sit and judge the people the whole day. And more than that, if someone has an issue against a king from the household of David, he can be taken to court. But that's unique only if you come from the household of King David. Being that there was terrible stories that happened, they don't have that trait of humility. They cannot be judges. They cannot be taken to court, because we have to go with the presumption that they will not become subservient to the words of Torah. And then kings have a lot of power. And if a king feels that he's being challenged by the judges, all types of very not good things could happen, as they did in the past. Just like a Beis Din must be on the highest level of righteousness. They have to also be physically without blemish. And therefore we have to make an effort to go and look. The first physical character trait that is considered something important, not essential, but important for a judge, Bali Seva means his hair should be white. You have to understand that a black-haired person or a red-haired person is a downer. That means he's young. We don't want young. Young is a terrible disadvantage in a judge. How can this person be a judge? They don't have life experience. What do they know? So that's the first thing. And you define that by having white hairs. Now, I know many people here are very young and they have white hairs, so they're also not qualified. Sometimes you get white hairs before your time, but it means, Bali Seva means probably, I think, someone in their 60s or 70s have to look, not earlier than that. Number 2, Bali Koime, we would like for them to have an impressive height. Does that mean they have to be giants? No, but it's ideal. In other words, we want for them to be people that when you stand in front of them, they're big. Bali Mara, they have dignified appearance. They understand the whispered matters, which means that they understand Kabbalah, that they understand Ma'aseh Bereshis, Ma'aseh Merkava. And they should be comfortable in the majority of the languages spoken at the time, or spoken at least in this region. For the judges never to have to hear something through an interpreter. Halacha 7. Now, all of this is for the Sanhedrin, even the minor one. What about a court of only 3? They don't need all of the above qualifications, but we need to have the following 7. Only the following 7. God should help us all. Chachma, Yira. Yira means they should be aware of the presence of God, not in their belief, but in their body. They are in awe of God. They have to be humble. The sinas moment, they have to have a hatred towards people that are pursuing money. They're pursuing truth. The ahavas ha'emes, they have to love the truth. They have to have a love towards people. Many of these people that love the truth, they have disdain to people because most people don't love the truth. So that's very unique. They love truth, but they love all human beings. And they have to have a good name. This is not even for the big Sanhedrin. This is just the lowest standards to be joined any court. All of the above qualifications are written explicitly, as it says, quoting from the portion of the Devarim, Anashim Chachamim Unavaynim. Then when it says V'yiduam l'shavteichem, V'yiduam means known. It means beloved by your tribes. In other words, appreciated by the people. Appreciated by the people is only someone who loves people. Many times, big Chachamim, the smarter you get, the more you go into your own cave. You disconnect from the people. No, it has to be a person that's connected to the people. What will make, the Rambam is giving you good advice. What makes one beloved to the people? Bisman. And this order is important. Number 1, Shiyu Bali Ayin Toiva. It's someone who has a favorable eye. Notice when they look, they see the good. Someone who has to have a humble soul. Vechevrasan Toiva. Someone who always keeps good company. You want to know a person, look at the person's friends. Umasan v'diburim benachas avris, and he conducts business gently. How many people do we know that they're very, they give a lot of tzedakah, but they say with pride, but business is business. And in business, they're very rough. No, that's not good. That's not a good character trait. Be gentle. Gentle doesn't mean that you're going to allow people to take advantage of you. I get that. But there's a certain gentleness that dafke, even in the world of business, this person has to have. We also have from Yisrael, from Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law, that mentioned Anshe Chayil, men of power. The men of power, doesn't men of power sound like not gentle? Yeah, depends. For the world, gentle. For you, for yourself, power. Power means geboidim b'mitzvahs. That this guy is always going to do the mitzvahs. They're going to use all of the gevura towards themselves. Umedagdikin al atzman, the koivshin es yitzram, achelo yilahem shum genai v'loy shemra. There'll be no unpleasant rumors about the person, and even the greatest thing is pirkon noah. Pirkon noah means that many people, when they get older, they get better. Halavai, all of us, we get better. But many people, when they were very young, they misbehave. Pirkana is someone who, even during his youth, everyone spoke highly about. Including in this quality of men of power, that they should have a courageous heart, because sometimes you have to be courageous. Sometimes ruling in favor of the poor, of the widow, of the orphan, against the mighty, you have to have courage. That's the meaning of a man of power. Power for the truth. What Moshe Rabbeinu did to the daughters of Israel. You have to have humility. You have to have fear of God, awe of God. But you have to hate profit. In other words, that they are not overly concerned about amassing money. Because anyone that's overly concerned about money, chesed yavi'enu, he will be overcome by want, and it's never enough, and that can lead a person off the right path. Anshe Yemes, people of truth, which means that they have to pursue justice, not because of any exterior reason, but they pursue justice machmas atzma madaton, because of their own inclination. They understand that's the right thing. Do the right thing because it's the right thing. They love the truth and they hate chamas. They hate crime. You have to have people that hate crime. A big part of the society is that people are very liberal, which is, there's a beautiful part to it. They love everyone, but they don't hate crime. You got to hate crime. And they run away from any type of crookedness. Halacha 8. The responsibility of finding such people was put upon the great Sanhedrin. They were the ones that sent shluchim throughout the entire land to find these people. If you find someone that's a chacham, the yerachet, anav, shafi means he's modest, or pirkaino, which means he has a good reputation even from his youth. The ruach habriyas noicha is beloved by the people. They would first make him a judge in his own city and let him get experience there. And from there, they would bring him up to the door of the Harabais. From there, they would bring him up to the door of the Azara. And ultimately, he would go up, be promoted to the Beis Din Agadol. Halacha number 9, Beis Din Shel Shloisha. If amongst the three you had one convert, that invalidates the Beis Din. Achati imam Yisrael. You have to have, even for a Beis Din of 3, someone whose mother is Jewish, which means, by the way, that if his father is a convert, it's okay. Not he. If his father is a convert and his mother is Jewish, he's worthy to go into the Beis Din of 3. But if you have a mamzerus issue, even if all 3 are mamzerim, for a Beis Din of 3, it's okay. If one of them is blind in only one eye, that's also okay for a Beis Din of 3. By the Sanhedrin, that they have to be able to see with both of their eyes. Now, someone who's blind in both of their eyes, pasul lakoil. Not only I want you to know, not only are they not qualified to be a judge in a Beis Din of 3, but they're not qualified to be a witness. As we'll see later. Halacha number 10. Even though you can't have less than 3. Now the Rambam is saying a very important rule. Not as a Beis Din, one individual can render a ruling. Because if someone asks a question to one individual, they cannot say, I can't even tell you the answer because I need 3. You can render a ruling as one by Torah law. Shenemar, as it says, "B'tzedek tishpot amisecha," pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim, judge your fellow with righteousness in the singular. However, the rabbi said, don't do that. Don't judge on your own. You have to have 3. And two, b'chlal, rabbinically, 2 people that render a judge. Now, guys, 2 people can act as mediators. You can always act as a mediator. It's a whole different thing. But if 2 litigants are coming into one individual and they're saying, we don't want to go to a Beis Din, tell us the din. By Torah law, you can render a judgment, and the Chachamim says don't do it. Now, however, even the Chachamim made exceptions. Halacha 11. If some person is known to be a mumcha l'rabbi, he's an expert, right? Meaning he has experience of being a judge. Or if someone got permission from the Beis Din of being a judge by himself, such a person is allowed to judge all by himself. Not a Beis Din. And this also is something that happens nowadays. 2 people, they say, I don't want to go to Beis Din. We both agree to go for that rabbi. Now, as a mediator, it's b'chlal not a problem. But sometimes you have rabbis that have a lot of experience in being a judge in a Beis Din. Then it's okay. Still, even though it's mutter, Chachamim still advise, take other people with you. Don't judge all by yourself. Amru Chachamim, alti dan yechidi, she'ein dan yechidi el echad. Only God Almighty sits in judgment by himself. Halacha Yud Beis, yesh, another rule, this is big now. Yesh la'adam lasis din la'atzman. A person may execute judgment by himself if he's able to do so. In other words, if I see my property in your hands, I can take it back. If I know that halachically it's mine, and I'm not obligated to take you to Beis Din. Even though I wouldn't lose anything if I would take you to Beis Din, or I wouldn't lose anything if I would have to wait until the court of Beis Din, I have the right, if my property is in your house, I can take it back. And therefore, if I took it back, and then you took me to Beis Din, how dare I break into your house and take back my bicycle that you stole? And I'm found, it proved in Beis Din that the bicycle was mine, they're going to allow me to keep it. They're not going to say that even though it was yours, you should have followed the procedure. We don't say that. If and they find out that the guy who took the law in his own hand did so rightfully based on halacha, the din emes don la'atzmai, then they won't undo his judgment. Because we are allowed, as we're saying here in halacha Yud Beis, yesh la'adam lasis din la'atzmai. And we'll have more about that later. Halacha Yud Gimel, afa pisha Beis Din shel shloisha, Beis Din shalom. A court of 3 is enough. Nevertheless, the more the better. Kolzman shem rabim, it's better. And it's better for a decision to be made by 11 than by 10. So it's every additional mind and person is an add, is a benefit. The Beis Din, however, if you want to add numbers, don't add numbers. They all have to be Talmidei Chachamim, and they have to be worthy. Ru'y means they have to have good character traits. And the final halacha, You, if you're asked to sit as a dayan, you have to know who are the other judges. You are forbidden to sit down until you know who are the other colleagues. Because maybe whoever's putting this together is going to put men that are not suitable. And you're going to be part of a kesher boigdim. You're going to be part of a band of traitors and not inside a basin. Be careful who you are joining. If you're asked, today you have these gatherings and you put together these panels, don't agree to sit in a panel prior to you knowing who are the other people in that panel. Today's third chapter, Perek Shlishi, is going to teach us about the system, the times that the Beis Din is going to be open. Even when they are open, as we'll see, they can only render rulings during the day, not during the night. The type of reverence one has to have in a court because the Shekhinah is present there, etc. This chapter has 10 halachas, beginning with halacha al. Until when should the judges hold session? There's a halacha for that. The minor Sanhedrin and a Beis Din of 3, they sit down after Shachris. After Shachris, important, that's not by daybreak. After Shachris until the end of the 6th hour of the day, which means until the beginning of afternoon. But Beis Din Hagadol, they would not begin after Shachris. They have to open up for session from when the Tamid Shel Shachar. Tamid Shel Shachar, guys, we learned is at daybreak. Way before most people daven Shachris. And they have to be open in session until when the afternoon Tamid is brought, which is the 9.5 hours from Netzach Hama, which is the middle of the afternoon. Shabbos is a Yom Tovim, in which we may not render halachic rulings. So they did not sit in the courthouse, but there was a Beis Medrash on Harabayas, and that's where they should be found. Halacha 2. You don't always have to have the 71 judges sitting when the court is holding session. It does not mean all 71 have to be there. Now, there were times that they were needed. If there was something that was being brought up there and we really needed everyone's opinion, then everyone would be notified, we need you present. But this thing that they're open every day, every weekday, from daybreak until middle afternoon, till 3:30 p.m. approximately, there has to be someone there. How many? 23 from the 71. Whoever has their own private stuff that they need to attend to, they can go do it. But how did it work? Before you walked out, if you're a judge, turn around, make sure that even if you leave, there's a 23 left. Like today, you're in a shul, and if there's 12 people, you can walk out. If there's 10 people on you can't walk out. You have to make sure that whenever it's open for a session, there has to be 23 people. Which means if one guy has to leave, he has to take a look around. If Yeshar Sham Esrim V'Shloisha without him, then he's allowed to leave. And if not, you may not leave until someone else comes. Number 3, you never open up a case at night. You never begin a trial at night. And this is something that we learn from oral tradition. Based on a pasuk in Shreiftim where it says, Kol Riv V'Chol Naga, for the judges that are here to adjudicate every dispute and every blemish. In other words, there's a certain area in halacha where they have to make a judgment whether that blemish is halachically problematic or not. Now, we already learned that these types of negoyim may only be looked at during the day. And the Torah puts together all disputes and blemishes. Have to be adjudicated only during the daytime of the day. We're going to get more details in a moment. Halacha number 4, a part of the judgment is to weigh the reasons why zakai, the reasons why chayev. But there's another part. Sometimes witnesses are needed. They cannot even receive witnesses. They can't even authorize or notarize documents at night. Imagine. However, if it's only a monetary case and they already began it by day, here is the exception. They can finish that din at night. Halacha number 5, hanachalois, the division of an inheritance has the same rule of dinim as it says in Parshas Pinchas concerning inheritance. Chukas mishpat, and therefore, ein mapil nachlas balaylo. We may not divide an inheritance beginning that process at night. Halacha number 6. 2 people are going to visit someone who's deathly ill, And as we have been learning above, in other words, this guy, the Shchigmira, is giving instructions how to divide his estate. So if there's only two people, they can only act as witnesses, not as judges, so they are able to write what he instructed, but they can't, but if there were three, not only can they write it, but they can act also as judges. But now we have to know, well, how is it connected to here? Yeah, because judgment, even of money, can only at least begin. It has to begin at day. So that is only allowed during the day. But at night, even if you have three people, they can only write down as witnesses, but they cannot already paskin because you cannot begin a case, even if it's only dinimamenis at night. Halacha number 7. Kol Bezdin Shel Yisrael. Now we're going to go into that is Hagun. When you have a suitable Bezdin, any Bezdin, not only of 23, even of 3, you should know the Shechina is manifest there. And therefore you have to behave accordingly. The judges themselves have to sit, the Imam and the Yiram. That's an inner feeling. And now that has to be externalized by also by Atifa. They have to be wrapped in a talus. They have a special judge's cloak. Where did the Goyim get it from us? The Kovid Rosh, they have to conduct themselves in reverence. This goes even on the judges. For us, they cannot act frivolously, lischayik, to make jokes, or to start having shmoozing. They can talk. It doesn't have to be only related to the case, but it has to be b'divrei Torah or and chachma. Halacha number 8. Kol Sanhedrin, a melech, a reish galus, that wrongfully appointed for amongst the Jewish people a dayan, a judge, she'eino hagun, that's not qualified, ve'eino chacham v'chachmas ha'Torah, someone who's not worthy of being a dayan because his character trait, as we learned in the previous chapter, is not up to par. Even though, look at the words of the Rambam, he's kulay mahmadim. He's entirely a delight. He's the most charismatic person around. And he has other qualities. Whoever had the power and wrongfully used it to appoint him as a judge violated the negative commandment. And this is the meaning of the pasuk in Parshas Devarim, where it says, Lo yisakiru panim b'mishpat. Literally, that means don't show favoritism in judgment. Now, when you read the verse without the oral Torah, you could wrongfully think, it means that you are the judge, don't show favoritism to a litigant. That's not what the pasuk means. If you have the power and the responsibility to appoint judges, know that if you're going to appoint a judge that doesn't meet the above qualifications, that is showing favoritism. Like, why did you appoint him? Because you showed favoritism to the judge. The Torah is addressing the ones who are appointing judges. And why would someone be appointed if they're not worthy? Because sometimes a person is very attractive. You want to have an attractive judge. A guy say, this guy is so attractive, everyone is going to listen to him, maybe I'll make him into a judge. Or that person is so physically strong, I'll make him into a judge. Or that guy is my relative, I'll make him into a judge. This guy speaks all the languages. Now that's a secondary quality, but that's not the primary quality. I'll make him into a judge. That's what you're not allowed to do. Because what will be the end? That the guy that's not qualified will give wrong rulings. Nimsa turns out, and that won't happen because the judge maliciously is doing that, but simply because he's not qualified. And that's the meaning of the pasuk. Don't show favoritism in choosing who will be a judge. Whoever appoints a judge that's not fit, it's as if he erected a monument. A monument is something that we may not erect. It's already connected. Right, it's connected in the parsha of idolatry. Imagine, as it says in Parsha Shoftim, furthermore, sometimes you appoint a judge who's not worthy. There was no one else there. Even worse is if you did have someone who's qualified. It's as if you planted a tree for idolatry. It's even worse than a matzeva. As it says in Parsha Shoftim, juxtaposed to the mitzvah of appointing judges, right afterwards it says, don't plant a tree, which is called an ashera, near the altar of God that you have to make. And the mizbeach, the altar, by oral tradition, the altar is in reference to the Sanhedrin. A Beis Din is called a mizbeach. In the place of appointing a proper judge, of having a Beis Din, you're appointing someone that's not worthy. That's planting an idol tree in the temple area. God forbid. When it says at the end of Parshas Yisro, now we know the pshat. right? Chitas. Hopefully we learn chitas. But it means here that Rambam, Elohah. Elohah doesn't mean a deity. Elohah here means a judge. That's why we don't say Elokah. Don't appoint a man of power, a judge, because of gold and silver. Sometimes people were appointed because they're very wealthy. That's not the reason why someone should be appointed. Halacha number 9. If someone gave money to be appointed, you may never stand up in front of that person. Actually, the Chachamim commanded us to denigrate him, to deride him. The Chachamim say that if you see someone who paid to be a judge, the talis that he uses to wrap himself in, look at it and see the saddle blanket of a donkey. Look at these. They want you to see a donkey. Halacha 10, the final halacha of this chapter. This is the right manner of conduct of the earlier Chachamim. Is they flee from being appointed. No one should want to be a judge. People should want to learn the Torah that's needed. That's learning Dayanis is older, but to be appointed, that's not something that I want to be a fireman, I want to be a judge. Don't be a judge. The Doichken Atzman Harbe, they allowed themselves to undergo a lot of pressure. They didn't give in. They did not become a judge. Why would they become a judge? If they see that there is no one else that's qualified like them, then they have to do it. You have to come to a place where you don't want to be the judge, but you have to be the judge because you're the most qualified. And in other words, you have to see, well, you don't have to be the most qualified, but you have to see that if you won't be appointed, whoever will be appointed is going to actually impair the legal system. And even then, when they sat down, they couldn't do it. The people needed to implore them, and people needed to compel them until they actually did it. Ideally, we should want to be Torah scholars, Torah Talmidim. We would like to be a shliach of the Rebbe. We want to be in service of the community. But the last thing one should want to be is to be a judge. And God willing, to be continued. Yes, Baruch, you can ask. Baruch, I can't hear you. Baruch, I can't hear you. You're muted. Now I hear you.
Well, okay. During the time of Mashiach, why would we need law and order? Did you hear that? During the
during the times of Mashiach,
why would we need law and order if it's going to be like a Sabbath every day?
I'll tell you why, Baruch. People right now, who are going to be doing the right thing, sometimes they don't know what the right thing is. Like a Beis Din doesn't only have to be for people, it can be about an item, like we're getting ready for Pesach. Is this product kosher for Pesach or not? It can be a complex halachic question. You have to have ultimately judges who are going to render a ruling, kosher or not kosher.
Okay, but there won't be any evil inclination in the world.
According to the way Hasidus unfolds the Messianic era, in the earlier time of the Messianic era, there will still be the evil inclination, very much like right now, but people will come to a place where they're going to do the right thing in spite of the evil inclination. Once the evil inclination is going to be slaughtered, which will be at some time in the future, then you're right. When people do not have an evil inclination, then the choices that will be made will not be between good and bad. But even in the earlier times of the Yemaisa Mashiach, there's still going to be bad in the world. Mashiach is going to have to fight against bad in the world, but we're going to be in the game. We're going to be on the right side.
Thank you.
Good point. All right, guys, having Baruch, it's great to see you. Welcome back.
Thank
you.
You.
Great. Here you go.
Great. Thank you.